Hello, everyone. My name is Ulrike Gretzel. I'm a senior fellow at the University of Southern California in the USA. I am really sorry that I cannot be with you in person because of the pandemic, and because of the time difference, I'm also not able to do this live. But I would like to thank the conference organizers for this opportunity to share some of my thinking with you. And I'm going to present on the smart tourism mindset today. And you'll see that I've been thinking about this for a while, and I'm going to share my ideas, but I'm also hoping that you will chime in via email maybe. I'm really looking forward to receiving your questions or your comments, because this is not a done deal. This is a process that I'm going through. This is an idea that I'm developing, and I'm hoping that you will find it interesting. So what am I talking about here? What is this about? I think that smart tourism is an incredible opportunity, and especially right now during this pandemic, I think that smart tourism really stands out because of its ability to address some of the issues we have right now. So obviously, there are some technological solutions that smart tourism promotes that I think are very helpful for dealing with the pandemic, trying to recover tourism during this time. So from cleaning robots to tracing apps to monitoring of tourist flows to contactless service. Those are technological solutions that smart tourism promotes that post-pandemic tourism or during pandemic tourism needs. But there's also an opportunity right now, and we've been talking about this in a recent article in the Journal of Information Technology and Tourism, that there's a moment here in time that allows us to also rethink technology and the way we conceptualize technology, the way we use technology, the way we implement technology. And so smart tourism provides a framework for us to do that. Smart tourism also provides a concrete pathway to sustainability, and that includes the mitigation of over-tourism, and that, of course, has been already discussed a little bit in the literature. But also, beyond that, it provides some opportunities to think about governance, destination governance, in ways that maybe lead to more sustainability, also from a social perspective. And those are ethical guidelines as well as guidelines relating to justice. So thinking about the ethical and the just destination governance in this moment in time is important, and smart tourism provides us with ideas to do that. There's also, of course, during a crisis, there's a need to think about the next crisis already, and this notion of resilience is very important for crisis management. And we found out that resilience and smart tourism actually have a lot of parallels, a lot of things in common, and therefore really maybe give us some ideas on how to create more resilient destinations for the future. But smart tourism also gives us a mandate to think more about holistic destination management. First of all, it really is good for tourism because it elevates the DMO, and it says we need someone in charge of tourism, but they should not be working in the way they've been working traditionally. So there's again an opportunity here to think about governance. So what does this mean for research? How is this reflected in the literature? And we've seen recently that there is a lot happening in smart tourism research. Recent reviews on the topic have shown that there's tremendous growth. There's a lot more papers in the space, but there's still many perspectives missing, the planning perspective, especially the sociology, the geography. It's not truly interdisciplinary yet, and definitely also not transdisciplinary. So it's very much still focused on traditional tourism aspects as well as the technology side. And we still see a lot of papers that specifically look at these single technology applications. Therefore, smart tourism unfortunately remains largely misunderstood. So there's no clear conceptualization throughout the literature. We've been trying to do that, but not everyone is adopting the same kind of idea of smart tourism. I think it's also pretty clear from these reviews that we are still lagging behind the general smart city literature, especially in terms of governance. But also in terms of this critical stance, the smart tourism discourse is not really analyzed in the way that the smart city discourse is being scrutinized by researchers. Also, we've seen some recent papers that smart tourism literature fails to address emerging social issues, even though it supposedly has this sustainability agenda. And in a recent paper that I did with a colleague in Brazil, we also identified a lack of really a developmental, a future-oriented perspective. So, thinking about the future, what is it that we need? And for me, this is very important because smart tourism is, in essence, a utopian vision of the future of tourism. So, what about utopias? We rarely ever talk about utopia in tourism research or practice. And utopias are there for a very good reason. They are critical tools for imagining what the future should hold. Some people actually define them as premature truths. And that also stresses that there is a path to realization. Sometimes we use utopian to say something that is so far out that it has no opportunity to be realized. But that's not true with utopias. Utopias, once you imagine something, once you have that idea, there is that path towards realization. Kosinets, in a recent paper in the Journal of Business Research, specifically talks about utopias and their relevance for us as a society. And he describes them as an attempt to create significantly better societies by first challenging the dominant social institutions, such as capitalism, socialism, contemporary politics, or communism, whatever it is. So first there needs to be a critique, a realization of the status quo, from which we then can move on and imagine this new future. So utopias are visions of the future, and they shape our ideas of what change needs to happen. Now, Kozinets also says that we have a lot of me-topias out there, so where consumers basically envision a better world for themselves, and these visions sound very much like cocaine, this medieval myth of a land of luxury and plenty, where there's no physical discomfort and where pleasures are always immediately at hand, and where there's just absolutely no friction and no suffering. So you have rivers of milk that have floating cheese in them, and candy everywhere, right? And chicken, roasted chicken flying into your mouth. Now, these visions are not very helpful for us to kind of think about the future, especially in a sustainability context. What we need are utopias, and there are actually some out there that have been developed that I think can serve as models for us to think about smart tourism and smart destinations. So Walt Disney designed this experimental prototype community of tomorrow, and you might not have ever heard that spoken out like this, but I'm sure you're familiar with Epcot. So this was his dream of a place, a community where new ideas and new technologies that are emerging become the center of that community. And he describes it as a community of tomorrow that will never be completed, but will always be introducing and testing and demonstrating new materials and new systems. And Epcot will always be a showcase to the world of the ingenuity and imagination of American free enterprise. So he envisioned this as a very capitalist, technology-driven community where consumers and companies experiment together and build the future. But there's also alternative utopias like the Burning Man Festival, where once a year in the desert here in the United States, people come together to explore a community that is not reliant on market-based transactions, and that fosters creativity, that kind of breaks the boundaries. So for this period of time, they built this city, this utopian city, where art and creativity rule. But we also have eco-villages, so we have ecotopias that have been very successful in different places of the world, where people as communities imagine how they could structure a community differently and provide a way of living that is more sustainable. So when we looked at what's out there in terms of smart tourism brands, and we were a little discouraged because we saw that most of what the industry is talking about are kind of disengaging techtopias, where the technology is at the forefront and the community is basically absent. And that's the community of the businesses, the tourism providers, as well as the residents, as well as the tourists. So Destinos Inteligentes is actually one of the better examples, but still you see here very mechanical, clean version of a place that looks like a machine rather than a real place where people would come together and commune. So we concluded our paper by saying they failed to truly mobilize communities and tourism stakeholders to work together to create an alternative future that achieves betterment for all. So we see them right now. They're blueprints that probably are there to create and demonstrate investment opportunities, but they're not necessarily these utopian visions that might, really help us move forward in the smart tourism world. So what I'm proposing then is to really change the way we think about smart tourism and to adopt a smart tourism mindset. So a mindset, a way of thinking that allows us to collectively envision the future, and that this mindset becomes ingrained in all tourism efforts that lead up to developing smart tourism. So what is a mindset? A mindset is a frame of mind, a way of thinking, a mental disposition, a set of assumptions or notions, an outlook or a conviction. So usually it's applied at the individual level and dealt with from a psychological perspective. But it also applies to the way we make decisions in general, right? A mindset influences how we interpret and respond to challenges. And therefore, anyone who is responsible for governance of smart tourism, but also just in general, the decision-making that happens within smart tourism, as well as the envisioning of smart tourism, all those people come to that process with a specific mindset. And I'm trying to propose here that we need to challenge that mindset, and we need to adopt a specific mindset and promote the adoption of that mindset in others as well to move smart tourism forward. So Dweck has defined mindset theory and has come up with basically two different kinds of mindsets. And one is a fixed mindset and the other one is a growth mindset. And it's really the growth mindset that leads to more success, more resilience, more development in a positive way. And the growth mindset is built on learning, reflection, and a sense of purpose. So we need to kind of think about the smart tourism mindset as a growth mindset. It also needs to be guided by values, right? So if smart tourism mindsets shape the way smart tourism is conceptualized, then we need to think about the values that are being adopted, that are being promoted, that are being taken for granted also when coming to this process. And there's unfortunately currently very little concern in the literature as well as in practice regarding the values that are embedded in the smart tourism agendas. So this is part of my push towards a little more critical views on smart tourism, where we have to think about, okay, what is it actually that we are promoting here? So the smart tourism mindset seeks to make values explicit and embed them into frames of thinking that then permeate everything we do, from goal setting to governance. So if we talk about values, then we can think of culture, right? A culture is basically a value and belief system. And so we need to have a smart tourism culture. Everything we do at a smart destination is going to be driven by that culture. And that culture exists, but I'm proposing here that we make it explicit and we discuss it, and we try to shape it in a way that it becomes beneficial to our smart tourism endeavors. So thinking about this notion of culture, there's a lot of research out there on culture that we can borrow from. What are cultural values and beliefs that could be important for smart tourism development? And here's just a preliminary idea framework for what the smart tourism culture could look like. And again, that might actually be adjusted to the specific destination. But thinking about some basic cultural tendencies that people have identified, clearly a long-term orientation, a future orientation is needed here. We said a utopia, so a collective understanding, a collectivist notion of smart tourism is needed. And everything we've been reading about participatory governance being important for smart city development as well as smart tourism development, that basically is encapsulated in low power distance. So there's not a lot of hierarchies here, but really access participatory notions of who's in charge and processes that help us get things done. So this culture then allows us to think about the smart tourism goals. So there needs to be an alignment, right? And if we believe in accessibility for all and sustainability and participatory governance, in justice and ethical and justice-focused governance, as well as in wanting to reach quality of life and well-being that basically outrules or becomes more important than short-term economic growth, then the values need to feed into this. So what we also have been seeing a lot in smart tourism is this notion of value co-creation. So I'm agreeing with this. We need to have a value co-creation mindset. But what about that, right? What's important about this mindset? Yes, value is being created, but thinking about the value co-creation literature, we also need to understand that there is institutional logics, and we might need to recognize them as well as maybe think about how to change them if they're not supportive of the kinds of value creation or co-creation we need in a smart tourism system. We've been discussing for a while now this notion of an ecosystem perspective. Well, that means that we're thinking in terms of balance. We're thinking in terms of interdependence. We're thinking in terms of kind of a value chain, as well as an environment that needs to be conducive to creating value propositions. But in contrast to a regular Earth-based ecosystem, right? In smart tourism, we think about flexible roles. We also have non-human actors, and it's a plug and play. People can easily move in and out of this ecosystem. And again, if we derive values from this cultural framework and understand that that's important for creating the smart destination of the future that actually corresponds to this utopian ideal that we're imagining, then we also need value-driven value co-creation. And that basically means that not every value co-creation is beneficial or is seen as appropriate in the system, and that there needs some culture that then says, look, this is not in accordance with the values that we actually stand for as a smart tourism destination. What we have also seen a lot in the smart tourism literature is this focus on innovation, and innovation, of course, is tied to creativity. So what does a creativity-focused mindset look like? It's a continuous mindset, right? A continuous process, a mindset that is focused on generating these utopian visions on a regular basis, and also a mindset that is not afraid to let go of previous visions. So it's an evolutionary perspective. This mindset understands the importance of play. As human beings, as animals, play is important to the development of our brains, as well as our decision making, our social interactions. So unless there's an opportunity for us to play within the smart tourism ecosystem, this creativity kind of focus will will exist maybe for a short term, but will not survive. And of course, related to that is experimentation. So built-in experimentation, a mindset that allows us to do risky things, right? To play around a little bit within a framework, right? Play means that you can explore some risks, but there's also a buffer there. There's a safety net there that holds you up if the experiment goes wrong. Another thing that I think is important about this mindset is permeability, and that means openness. So you see here a picture of a cell, and you see here that a cell is something that is not shut off from the rest of the environment. There's a lot of things that come through the cell membrane, but it also has mechanisms to decide what comes in and what has to stay outside. So there needs to be receptiveness, there needs to be awareness, there needs to be a recognition of embeddedness within larger organisms, and also an understanding of complexity of these exchanges that need to happen. But then the values come in terms of deciding, okay, here's maybe some things where we draw the line, right, where there is a boundary, where we will kind of start our defense mechanism to not let that into our system. I'm also proposing that a smart tourism mindset needs to be a liquid mindset, and that comes from Zygmunt Bauman's understanding of liquid modernity. And I'm going to just quickly introduce this idea because I haven't really seen very much in tourism built on it. So liquid smartness, from my perspective, kind of builds on his notion of a normative mindset with an emphasis on shifting rather than staying, and fluid changes in positions within networks. So everything is in flux, and so therefore smart tourism also needs to be liquid. And this has been applied to consumption, for example, by Barty and Eckert, who talk about liquid consumption as ephemeral, access-based, and dematerialized. And so we need to think about structuring smart tourism in a way that that acknowledges these big trends, but also takes advantage of the ideas behind that. So that translates then to liquid management, to liquid organization. So I've recently thought about what a smart DMO needs to look like, for example. So deploying resources fast, having needs-based infrastructures, having a highly flexible workforce, more project team-based one, using technology to operate anytime and from anywhere. So that would be a liquid organization. And then we have liquid governance that talks also about dynamism, institutional multiplicity, and really thinking about governing in a liquid world, right? So Bauman actually specifically talks about cities, the structures of cities as toolboxes that actually allow us to create solutions to address liquid modernity. And so smart destinations then should also be these toolboxes. But for that to be realized, we need this liquid smart mindset. Last but not least, I think we need a change mindset. This is all coming together. We've been talking about liquidity and permeability, so we need agility and we need capacity to change. And so I would summarize this as the ability to anticipate as well as shape technological change in ways that benefit the smart destination. So not to constantly kind of move in response to technological change, but to really fundamentally shape it in a way that allows us to realize this utopian vision. So to conclude, I'm proposing here that we need a smart tourism mindset that ensures a long-term perspective, system-level change, and continuous evolution. I also think that we need a smart tourism mindset that facilitates this envisioning of the future, of these utopias. That we need a mindset that enables the linking with broader smart development efforts to think beyond tourism. And so for me then, smart tourism development really becomes the creation, the promotion, and the implementation of the smart tourism mindset. Thank you very much for listening to me. I hope I gave you some ideas. And as I said before, I'm very much looking forward to your feedback. And you see my email address here, so I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you so much.